On fairness. When I talk of fairness, I'm not talking about the colour of something, the fairness of your skin, or the fairness of your hair. And of course, I'm not talking about fairs, as in places where you have entertainments and so on. What I'm talking about is an ethical matter of what is considered to be fair. Now, it seems at first sight a pretty uninteresting subject, and yet I've come to realize that, especially in learning how my own civilization, the Anglosphere, works, and indeed how many civilizations have worked, you have to consider what part is played in the invisible network or spider's web of fairness. Fairness means basically an acceptance by you and others that there are certain things and thoughts and standards which are fair. They are equitable. They are to be observed. But they are not things which you can lay down laws about. This is why in English law, which I'll explore a little more, you have a big division historically between the normal courts, which dealt with the laws of the land, which were made by Parliament, and you could say you must not steal and you must not kill and so on and so on. And the normal courts dealt with all those. But there grew up from about the 12th, 13th century a parallel set of courts called the equity courts, and equity is another word for fairness. They were presided over by the Lord Chancellor, who was the most important and powerful of the legal officials in England. And as Lord Chancellor, his court, the main one, was Chancery. And in these cases, what would happen is that someone who couldn't get any redress or protection from the laws because no actual law had been broken. So they might be a woman, they might be poor, they might be old, they might be forgetful. And they would come to him and say, look, someone's trying to get rid of me from my house, which I've lived in for 50 years. They say, unless I can produce the evidence that I own this house, they're going to send me out. I know I had it somewhere, but I can't find it now. My neighbours know that I own this thing, but I don't have any proof. Therefore, they will eject me. Or can you help me? My husband is being unkind and cruel to me, and he's not administering my property and looking after my children properly, and there's no legal recourse to this, but can you help me? And the Lord Chancellor would send out a delegation, interrogate the neighbours and others, and say, yes, this is what is fair, that you should stay in this house. And so the status of women, of children, of the poor was protected by laws of fairness, because the legal system itself nearly always favours the rich and the powerful. It's made by them and it favours them. So fairness is a protection against them. And this is what I found throughout my own life, although I didn't think about it when I first went to a boarding school. There were lots of people who could take advantage of you, bigger boys, obviously, and grab your marbles or conkers or behave in what you considered to be an unfair way. Likewise, teachers could do the same thing. They could say, you haven't done any work on this. It's a very shoddy piece of work. And you can say, well, I did do some work. I may not have got it right, but I did work on it. And you did. And so in both cases, if you are threatened with these things, the cry goes up, but that's not fair, and often sir. And you could appeal even against a teacher to other teachers or other boys, usually to other boys, and you say, sir, that isn't fair that you're keeping us in an extra half an hour just because we didn't do something properly or whatever. And the odd thing was that this cry of it's not fair was often very effective. In the playground, someone cheated in some game or whatever, and you would say, that's not fair, you didn't do it right. And children use this against parents. My own children, no doubt, from time to time have said, Alan, that's not fair, why are you doing that? And I'd have to take that into consideration. So this concept of a counterbalance to law, because the problem with law is that it can't begin to deal with every type of relationship. It can set out some broad parameters, but it can't delve into the thousands and millions of transactions. For example, in relation to my neighbours along my fences, it can say a few general things, that things growing on my side of the fence are mine and theirs. But there are many cases where it's a moot point. It's my apple tree leaning over into their garden. Whose apples are they? And so on. And nearly always you have to settle it by informal rules of fairness. And another obvious case is, I learned, was games. A game of football or cricket has very few rules. In fact, football only has 4 or 5 rules. And the rest of it depends really on fairness. There's no rule against standing in front of someone and jumping up and down and trying to make them laugh. And lots of other things, behaviour you could do. But it's unfair. And so fairness goes to the spirit, the intentions, the underlying features of actions and words, rather than the surface of them. And what is very strange to me is that I grew up and was taught these rules invisibly by my parents, grandparents, my friends, my teachers, until I'd got a whole set of ethical dispositions about fairness and unfairness. And many civilizations and societies looking at the English have considered this. They have elements of it, but in the English case it's very extreme and very important. And of course it's terribly important in all our daily lives, because, for example, in the main activity, which is in capitalism, economic activity, you can't possibly lay down rules or be examining thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions in the stock exchange or in shops or whatever. And so you rely very heavily on internalized, accepted norms of fairness. And this builds up over time. So it's very closely related to trust, which is an important part of modern societies. And it's an area which, when I looked at peasant societies in my anthropological work, the concept of fairness didn't seem to be at all developed. There was good behaviour within your family and outside, but the idea of being fair to strangers, for example, you weren't. If you could hoodwink them or cheat them, that was fine. But I'm under this burden of being fair, and so if I'm fair, it gives me a reasonable self-image and feeling about myself. So I try to be fair in my judgments, fair to my students, fair to my friends, fair to my family. And although it's sometimes against my own self-interest to do that, I know that if I do that and others do that, I can live in a reasonably civilized world where it isn't a matter of dog eat dog, but one where people play by the rules and fair's fair. So have a fair day.